This is CBC Vancouver News.
I know that there's been 2 arrests already. Please do not pay them.
Hundreds of politicians, police, and members of the public gather in Surrey over the rising number of extortion cases now stretching across the country. Plus,
we had a lot of local businesses that came by and said, oh yes, this happened to me last week.
a community group advocating for public safety doubles in size since the fall, with more joining the call for more to be done. And
we need a good basketball team back in our city and get people excited about sports.
Oh,
yes,
yeah, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely, yeah.
It's an idea that ebbs and flows, but survey says local sports fans really do want to bring the NBA back to BC. Good evening, I'm Tanya Fletcher. Thanks for joining us. We start in Surrey, where hundreds gathered today in the wake of a rising number of extortion cases targeting local businesses. Law enforcement personnel, politicians, and the public came together for a safety forum. While some of the first extortion cases were in Surrey, police say the problem has spread across the province and right across the country.
Residents of Surrey expect the Surrey RCMP to be working with West Van, to be working with Abbotsford and Edmonton and Brampton, Ontario. I have that same expectation of my investigators, so we are doing precisely that.
Since October, he says there have been 3 confirmed cases of extortion in Surrey alone. Businesses have been warned by officers about extortion attempts where callers make threats and demand money. Last week, 2 people were arrested, but many at this afternoon's meeting insist more needs to be done. RCMP are warning residents not to engage, but to report all incidents to police instead. Well, meanwhile, frustrations are rising alongside a recent increase in violence and vandalism targeting businesses in BC. As Janella Hamilton reports, the group Save Our Streets says it has doubled in size in the past 2 months. And many in the community say the government still needs to do more to protect them.
It was heartbreaking. It was really a little shocking.
Paula Lindner says 2 weeks before Christmas, her yarn store on East Hastings near Slocan Street was broken into. This glass store smashed. Customer orders rummaged through. Electronics taken.
It's very upsetting. Rather than being scared or frightened per se, it was very frustrating that our store was targeted.
Her frustration shared by a growing number of business owners and community groups across BC.
We had a lot of local businesses that came by and said, oh yes, this happened to me last week or a month ago or a year ago.
The province says there has been a concerning rise in violence and vandalism. It's what spurred the creation of the Save Our Streets or SOS coalition.
We have large companies with many outlets throughout the province. They're spending tens of millions of dollars on security that they never had to spend before. We have incidences where people are coming into stores at the end of the day, hiding in the store. Then when the store closes, they gather up valuable products.
He says their group has doubled since forming in the fall, with new members joining from across the province, including Victoria, Vancouver, Kelowna, Prince George, and Nanaimo. And despite government attempts to address the safety issues, he says the measures so far have fallen short.
We're saying to government, everybody needs to get together and decide how do we actually move the needle where we're getting results.
It is uncomforting. Once it happens once, you think, well, it can happen again. If we all sort of rally together, that's where we can move forward on how we go about taking care of our community.
The province has brought in new funding to support small businesses affected by crime and vandalism. Still, business owners like Lindner are left to come up with their own safety measures, like installing another gate. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
A private helicopter is believed to have crashed deep in BC's interior. It was flying from Calgary to Sicamous yesterday and was reported missing east of Revelstoke around 7 o'clock last night. Crews spent the day scouring Glacier National Park near Highway 1 without any luck. RCMP say low visibility forced them to search the area by ground only. It's not known how many people were on board. There has been another shooting in Coquitlam, the third one in 3 days. This shooting was in the middle of the afternoon near an elementary school off Guilford Way. That's where a man was found around 4 p.m. today with life-threatening injuries. 2 suspects were seen running away from the scene. Coquitlam RCMP say the last 3 days have been incredibly stressful for the community, but add these shootings are isolated and targeted incidents. One person has been killed and another hospitalized after a car crash in Maple Ridge last night. It happened around 7:30 p.m. along the Haney Bypass and 227th Street. 2 cars crashed into one another and sparked a fire. Police say one person died at the scene. Another was taken to the hospital with serious injuries. The exact cause of the crash is unclear. Well, changing climate patterns is one reason a wildlife rescue group in the Kootenays says it's seen an uptick in animals needing shelter. As Corey Bullock is finding out, this past year was one of its busiest, and it's putting a strain on resources.
Last year, Little Mittens Rescue in Golden saw a 17% increase in wildlife intake. They rescued and rehabilitated nearly 500 animals from the wild, which the group says has been a lot for a volunteer organization.
The struggle with the increased numbers has definitely been finding people that are able to respond to the calls.
Little Mittens saw 380 birds and nearly 100 mammals through its stores in 2023, the majority of which were from Cranbrook, Nelson, and Golden. And Worth says the increase has proved challenging.
We're just looking for more people that are willing and able to help with that first response. It's not easy, so I think that's the tricky part too, because, you know, we get all these injured and orphaned animals, and sometimes they're just injured too badly. So it's a heartbreaking task.
She says there are many factors that may have led to the increase.
Yeah, the increase could be due to a few different things. Part of it just being more encroachment on habitat, changing weather patterns when there's big storms and things like that. We do get, nests blown from trees and animals who are suffering from heat exhaustion.
Thankfully, she says another factor is increased awareness. Little Mittens hopes to recruit more volunteers for 2024 across the Kootenays, from Revelstoke all the way to the Columbia Valley. Corey Bullock, CBC News, Cranbrook.
In the NHL, North Vancouver's rookie sensation Connor Bedard is expected to be out for more than a month with a broken jaw. He was hurt during last night's game when his Chicago Blackhawks were playing the New Jersey Devils. The 18-year-old forward took a big hit from defenseman Brendan Smith in the first period. Bedard was able to skate off the ice before leaving the game. He was drafted first overall last June and leads all rookies with 33 points this season. Well, the Vancouver Grizzlies left town more than 2 decades ago after lackluster performances and a cold response from locals. But a recent survey shows sports fans here are once again craving an NBA team. Our Saurabh Sandhu has that story.
Demi Harris is a basketball player and coach based in Vancouver. His early basketball memories include attending a Vancouver Grizzlies camp.
They gave me a basketball with the Grizzlies sign on it, and they said if you wore it out, you could return it and get a new basketball.
But by the time Harris came back for a new ball, the Grizzlies were gone. The Vancouver Grizzlies stepped on an NBA court for the first time in 1995.
You could get a ticket at Shoppers Drug Mart for like $10, $13. Not many people would come to the game, so you just walk down and get a good seat after.
Over their 5 seasons in Vancouver, the Grizzlies won 101 games and lost 359. The team eventually moved to Memphis in 2001. Their exit hastened by poor performance and lack of support from local fans. But a recent survey by ResearchCo says 59% of British Columbians believe it would be a good idea to have an NBA team in Vancouver.
It's pretty high. I think when we look at the situation, especially when we compare it to the way the Grizzlies operated when they were in town, we certainly have a larger appetite for the NBA.
A sentiment echoed by many on the street.
Oh,
yes!
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. Go see a game.
We need a good basketball team back in our city and get people excited about sports.
Experts say the city's changing demographics may be one of the reasons for an increased demand for basketball, a trend evident from the sale of NBA merchandise in the city.
When we lost the NBA, all we had was the Lions and the Canucks, and now we have the Whitecaps and the Lions doing better. So there's a sense that if this is going to be a world-class city, we should get an NBA team.
Imagine seeing LeBron 2 times a year. Imagine seeing Kevin Durant 2 times a year.
In November 2023, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver named Vancouver, Montreal, and Mexico City as potential locations for international expansions.
Yeah! While nothing is in the works yet, industry experts say if a ball team was to make its way to Vancouver, don't expect it anytime soon. But that's not stopping the local fans from being excited about the slightest potential. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, more than a decade after the death of a BC woman, her family says they have a fitting tribute for their loving mother. She was a super Star Trek fan, and as Mira Baines shows us, her ashes are about to boldly go where few have gone before.
Gloria Nolan would have only dreamed of being a part of. And in just days, the new Vulcan rocket will blast off into space. On board, her ashes.
She also had a set of...
Her son Rod says the concept may seem like an out-of-the-world idea, but she was unique.
She believed so firmly in reincarnation that she didn't think that this was the end, this was just a transition.
Her family decided sending her ashes to space would be a fitting tribute.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
Nolan, a mother of 8, was a Trekkie, a huge fan of the television series Star Trek.
Some conventions occurred in Vancouver, and I ended up taking my mom and my sons.
Her ashes will be among 250 capsules of human remains, DNA samples, and other memorials. Already, the company has sent the remains of 2,000 people to space over the last 2 decades.
The science fiction lovers and adventurers are really looking at memorial space flights as a way to memorialize themselves or a loved one.
The remains of Star Trek's creator Gene Roddenberry and 3 actors from the original show, Nichelle Nichols, DeForest Kelley, and Canadian James Doohan, will also be on board.
For her to know that she was traveling into space with the representation of these people, I think would have thrilled her.
No way. The cost? More than $12,000 US. Still, this space expert says while it's a personal choice, there can be wider repercussions.
Then that starts to become a serious concern about polluting the orbital environment for other type of operations, as well as just dumping rocket exhaust into the upper atmosphere.
Gloria Nolan's family will be watching when her ashes are expected to embark on a journey to the final frontier from Cape Canaveral, Florida next week. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, still ahead, a panel blows out mid-flight on a plane taking off from Portland. We'll tell you how it happened coming up next. Stay with us. Welcome back. Today marks the third anniversary of one of the most infamous events in U.S. history. Thousands of supporters of then U.S. President Donald Trump stormed the Capitol in Washington in protest of the 2020 election results. As the CBC's Chris Reyes explains, the January 6th riot is now affecting this year's campaign.
I ask you to remember where you were 3 years ago today. January 6th, 2021.
Speaking at an event in South Carolina, Vice President Kamala Harris wasted no time marking this moment. Considered one of the darkest in American history, when thousands violently stormed the Capitol in an attempt to interrupt Congress from certifying Joe Biden's presidential victory. 5 people died in the chaos, more than 1,200 others arrested and charged.
They used brutal force and fear to try and overturn the results of a free and fair election.
That day began with Trump on a podium, urging his supporters to fight the 2020 election results.
If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Donald J. Trump.
Today, he's also at a podium at a campaign stop in Iowa, but no mention of Jan 6 at all. Trump instead quickly went on the attack, his direct target, President Joe Biden.
You know, this guy goes around and says, I'm a threat to democracy. No, he's a threat because he's incompetent. He's a threat to democracy.
Trump referring to Biden's speech in Pennsylvania on Friday that marked the January 6th anniversary one day early.
Today, we're here to answer the most important of questions. Is democracy still America's sacred cause?
The competing narratives from Biden and Trump looms large in this year's presidential race, where the two will likely face off as main rivals. Add to that, Trump remains embroiled in court cases in connection to what happened on that day and continued allegations of election interference. Trump still hasn't conceded that he lost in 2020.
So-called leaders still tried to mislead and gaslight by claiming it was a peaceful protest.
Hanging in the balance now, who the voters will listen to when they cast the ballot in November. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
Well, taking you overseas, officials from around the world are once again appealing for calm in the Middle East. This time after Hezbollah fired rockets from Lebanon into northern Israel. Retaliation, it says, for Tuesday's killing of a top Hamas leader in Beirut. As the risk of a wider war deepens, the death toll in Gaza continues to climb. The CBC's Caroline Bargu has the latest.
This is one of dozens of rockets Hezbollah militants have fired into Israel today, intercepted by Israeli defenses. Tensions have been escalating since a top Hamas official was killed in Beirut on Tuesday. Israel has not confirmed it was responsible for the attack, but Hezbollah has vowed retaliation. EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell and Lebanon's Foreign Minister Abdullah Abu Habib met today as part of an international effort to bring calm to the region.
It's absolutely necessary to avoid Lebanon being dragged into a regional conflict.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Turkish leaders today and is now on his way to Jordan. This is the fourth time he's traveled to the region since the October 7th attacks.
A big part of the conversations we'll be having over the coming days with all of our allies and partners is looking at the steps that they can take, using the influence and ties that they have to do just that, to make sure that this conflict doesn't spread.
Meanwhile, in Gaza, the death toll continues to rise. The Hamas-controlled health ministry said at least 122 Palestinians have been killed in the past 24 hours. Israel has been scaling back its military assault in the north, but continues to press on in southern Gaza. Most of the region's 2.2 million people have been displaced. Jan Egeland is the Secretary General for the Norwegian Refugee Council. He worries the bombardment in Gaza will push residents into a forced and prolonged displacement without any guarantees of return.
That there will be an enforced transfer of populations and no guarantees of return, no safety where they are relocated, no accommodation, no nothing. That's an atrocity crime under international law.
Nearly 23,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza and 57,000 have been wounded. Israeli military officials say 170 soldiers have died since the war began. 1,200 people were killed by Hamas in the October 7th attacks. 240 were taken hostage. About 100 have since been released. Caroline Bargood, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, frightful images today after a passenger jet suddenly blew a gaping hole mid-flight. It was on this Alaska Airlines plane. The panel blew out, leaving passengers and crew exposed at a very high altitude. Oxygen masks were deployed. The crew managed to return to Portland, Oregon and land safely. The panel may have been an optional door that's permanently been deactivated on Alaska Airlines. All of its Boeing 737 MAX 9s were temporarily grounded for maintenance and inspection. Here's a live shot of BC Place this hour. While we enjoyed a break in the rain this weekend, and Saturday's sun is set to return briefly for Sunday. I'll time out your 5-day forecast next. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. Enjoy groundbreaking contemporary works of theatre, dance, music, and multimedia at the annual Push International Performing Arts Festival, January 19th to February 4th. For the festival program and tickets, visit pushfestival.ca. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver inbox and keep connected with us.
Well, from rent to grocery prices, the rising cost of living was a big concern in 2023. And economic forecasts predict prices will continue to rise in 2024. Our Benny Brage runs down some of the other things you can expect to pay more for this year.
Here's what will cost you more this year in BC. Let's start with groceries. While some food will get cheaper this year, like dry goods and non-perishables, overall grocery bills are still expected to go up. According to this report, the typical Canadian family of 4 can expect an increase of about $700 in their annual food bill. You'll likely see the higher prices for baked goods, meat, and vegetables. So what about utilities? FortisBC, which provides power to some parts of BC, has raised electricity rates by 6.74% this January. This will cost the average customer about an extra $11.26 per month. BC Hydro has also applied to the BC Utilities Commission for a 2.3% rate hike that would start on April 1st, 2024, if it's approved. But if you lower your household's energy use by 10% this year compared to 2023, you'll be eligible for up to $100 in BC Hydro credits under the Team Power Smart Conservation Challenge. And what about housing? Well, if you're renting, landlords can increase their rent up to 3.5% this year. Meanwhile, house prices in Greater Vancouver will rise about 3% according to this market survey forecast. It's lower than the national average, but houses in BC are still the priciest in Canada. And if you're taking the ferry starting April 1st, BC Ferry's fare prices will go up by an average of 3.2% each year for the next 4 years. The Ministry of Transportation says provincial funding helped minimize the fare from being even higher. Benny Brage, CBC News, Vancouver.
And time for the 5-day forecast. We'll start with our overnight temperatures. Nothing out of the ordinary as we see mostly clear conditions right across the province, save for a bit of precipitation in the southeastern pocket through the Kootenays there. Here's our precipitation, and enjoy tomorrow's break in the weather while we have it. This next low pressure system is about to move in across the west coast, and you can see that'll come in pulses starting Monday into Tuesday, Wednesday as well. And this will be province-wide. It'll come down as either rain or snow, of course, depending on how cold it is. For tomorrow, we do have a snowfall warning in effect for Highway 3. This is through the Kootenays as well. The Kootenay Pass could see up to 10 centimeters of snow overnight into tomorrow morning. And Fort St. John, by the way, is really the cold spot this week. They're going to hit a low, an overnight low of minus 38 on Wednesday, so that is definitely below, much below what we're used to. Here's the 5-day forecast for Vancouver. Again, come Monday, we will see that precipitation could fall as snow in some of those higher elevations. Otherwise, just lots more rain on the way to start the work week. And that is your late news for this Saturday, January 6th. For news anytime, anywhere, download the free CBC News app. You can always find us online at cbc.ca/BC. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night.